This is a meeting review of Week 3 of reading the work Esotericism in Christian Psychology by Rebecca Nottingham. Reading reviews are reflections on group discussions and readings facilitated by Esoteric Reading Group. Week 3. 4 members gathered Sunday night on Zoom to continue investigating a proposition that is undoubtedly disturbing to those unacquainted with its origin. Man dwells in a sleep, a living death, from which he may awaken by applying to his being the principles of an esoteric teaching called the work. Section 1. The dark aspects of the work. It has been said in previous Gurdjieff discussions hosted by Esoteric Reading Group that this teaching seems to have an incredibly dark side. One member, with the teaching's remarks on man's mechanical levels of being in view, went so far as to draw parallels to Nazi ideology. It is the unfortunate fate of those who peer into darkness to be accused of polluting the world with darkness. Truth-bearers, messengers of all kinds, are often put to the stake for dutifully delivering things that were given to them. We must humble ourselves and admit that we were born into this world as children, and we remain children. As children, we are inclined to engage in fantastic self-deception. In the absence of knowledge, we paint the world in images of ourselves from the palette of our wishful desires. If we believe aspects of the work to be dark, they are only so because they violate our fantasies. When we observe ourselves as the work instructs us to do, we will find that we do not see ourselves as the children, as the sleeping humanity we are. On the contrary, we see ourselves as superheroes, endowed with true individuality, autonomy, and consciousness. We see our lives as the story of us, the main character, bravely overcoming obstacles and manifesting our will in the world. Are we that? The work says no. You are anything but that. What you take to be your true self is nothing but a denial of your true self. Out of what we are not is generated what we falsely believe ourselves to be. In the work, is the work dark because it shatters our illusions? No. It is a source of light because our illusions imprison us in maddening darkness, in sleep, in living death. The work tells us that we must die to who we falsely think we are, that is, personality, in order to be reborn as we truly are, divine essence. Of course, we cannot appreciate the benevolence of this light until we apply the principles of the work to ourselves, which ultimately means becoming passive in personality so that essence may be active. Before I continue, it should be noted that our discussion this week did not include any mention of the darkness of the work. I believe we who continue to gather understand the truth and light of the work. We may each disagree with certain aspects of this particular system, but I believe the perennial strands running through it are recognized and appreciated as flowing from the ultimate source of love and compassion. But since this is my first post about the work, I believe it is prudent to address the potential negative reception of it. Above, there's a quote from the readings for this week that includes phrases like, psychologically dead, not a real person. The work holds that these disturbing phrases describe the state of nearly all of humanity. This worldview is incompatible with the systems of government we depend on. Democracy assumes that individuals are capable of making independent decisions. If this was not the case, if most people are, quote, psychologically dead, and therefore are not, quote, real persons, then what is democracy but a myth used to disguise the rule of the few who, in contrast to the many, are psychologically alive and real? What is clear is this: our world, the way we've socially arranged ourselves, is incompatible with the truth of the work. We may imagine a misanthrope saying similar things. Everyone is stupid. The world is filled with mindless morons. All my coworkers are brain dead, etc. The work is not the product of an ill-disposed misanthrope because it recognizes the divinity of humanity and aims to give us the tools for reclaiming our high inheritance. Also, the work does not make such remarks without systematic justifications. Unlike the misanthrope, who has no desire to understand humanity, the work provides both explanations for why we are unreal and remedies for how to become real. Thus, the work calls us psychologically dead and not real as a matter of fact, not out of hatred. We have fallen in love with our prison. This is why the work appears to have dark aspects. Liberators become destroyers when prisoners believe themselves to be their prisons. We scream out as the bars to our jail cell are broken. Why are you breaking my legs? You are not what imprisons you. You are not your personality. Your true self lies high above what you falsely consider to be yourself. You are divine essence. Deep within you is something uncreated and immortal. The work aims to restore us to that uncreated seat within, to crown us there as spiritual sovereigns, immune to the demands of this world of slavery and death. Section 2. Four bodies of man, centers, essence, and personality. Personality is a product of experience. Essence is a timeless emanation of the divine. Personality is a temporal shell around divine essence, formed for our needs as actors in the world. We are not, it seems, in the world as one being, but as many bodies. Our physical body, for example, has a different set of contacts with the world than our emotional body does. The domain of physicality seems to be different than the domain of emotion. We may map between these domains, as we do with arts like dance, but they are understood to exist on different planes of our being, that is, they belong to different centers and bodies. Body, as I made note of in our Zoom discussion, is used as a figurative description of world interface or domain of experience, I believe. The author tells us that we may be centered in one of these bodies, and this centering biases our experience. There is a great emphasis on the need to balance these centers and withdraw our identification with these bodies. I am not my body. I am not my emotions. I am not my thoughts. If we are unbalanced, meaning that we are fixated on the experiences of one body, which produces a strong personality, we will naturally lack the perspective needed to withdraw our identification with said body. In other words, if you are a completely emotional person, then how would you know that you are not your emotions if there aren't any intellectual or physical influences providing you with contrasting points of view? The balanced man is one who has the ability to disidentify with his various bodies, which is the same thing as becoming passive in personality and active in essence, because his layered presence in the bodies forms the basis of becoming aware of the objective notion of body and thus of spirit as well. Becoming balanced in the centers serves the end of detaching from the personality. This is what I have gathered from this week's readings. The strength of our personality, the grasp it has on us, is proportional to our imbalance or inharmoniousness. Perhaps we can easily confirm this by noting that we tend to identify most with our strongest desires, that is, with our greatest imbalances. What is desire but imbalance? Balance liberates us from the world because it liberates us from the personality generated out of imbalance. Section 3. The Law of Three. The subject that seemed to stimulate the most discussion this week was the Law of Three and the two triads described by the author. After the author described in the text the Law of Three and how it relates to manifestation, the author explained that there are two different kinds of neutralizing forces, the force of life and the force of the work, which is also called the Holy Spirit. Apparently, these two kinds of third forces accompany two configurations of man. Undeveloped man, who is active in personality, passive in essence, and his manifestations are produced by the resolving power of life. And developed man, who is active in essence, passive in personality, and his manifestations are produced by the resolving power of the Holy Spirit. Each type of man is subject to different lines of causality because they manifest by different resolving powers. The man of the work, that is, the developed man, does not manifest by life. Thus, his manifestations are unconditional or independent of the circumstances of life. The work aims to develop a state of being that is capable of manifesting by the Holy Spirit, that is, a state of true individuality that directs its outer affairs from a wholly inner center, as opposed to the undeveloped man who is completely puppeted from without because his resolving power is bound up in the circumstances of life. I offered the following example to the group in our Zoom discussion. It seemed to be well received, although I'm not sure if it's a good one. Suppose we are driving and someone cuts us off in traffic. We may say that the active force is our intention to drive, and the passive force, or the force which resists our active intention, is the driver who cut us off. How we deal with this situation, that is, how we manifest a response, is dependent upon how we neutralize the active and passive forces. If life is our neutralizing force, we may manifest an angry response if the conditions of our life call for it. Having a really bad day would influence how we neutralize the forces because the conditions of our life bias us towards an angry manifestation. As we can imagine, if we manifest by the neutralizing force of life, then our actions are completely governed by the conditions of our life. Manifesting our response by the neutralizing force of the Holy Spirit seems to offer us a different path. Instead of being dependent on the conditions of life, we manifest from an atemporal center that is inherently unconditional. It seems like, in order to do this, we must be active in essence and passive in personality. Why this was not discussed. If our intentions are formed from essence, they are of a completely different character than the self-serving intentions of personality. Conclusion. There's much more to say, but I'll leave things here for now. I did not review this entry too much for mistakes, so please forgive my grammatical blunders and bring to my attention any conceptual errors. I look forward to our future discussions and reading your reviews or listening to reviews if you choose to produce any. Take care.